Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us today, Monday, into a conference. So we're finally getting back to new normal a little bit. My name is Bil Harmer. I am currently the CISO and Chief Evangelist for SecureAuth, and I'm talking to you from Austin, Texas today. I'm joined with three highly regarded colleagues out of the Canadian area in the security space. We have Nick Khoubbieh, Associate Partner at IBM Security Services, Michael Ball from Team CISO, and Alkin Gorgun from MIS3. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
What we're going to talk about today, subject is best practices for adopting zero trust. Now, let's first sort of pop through a little bit of an introduction. Give everybody, ask you to do 2 minutes on who you are, a little bit of background as it pertains to zero trust. Michael, if you'd kick us off.
Sure. So been in the industry about 30 years, CISO at a couple of significant companies, worked with Bill 15 years ago at Manulife, and about 5 years ago, I decided that a lot of the work I was doing was in and around supply chain cybersecurity as it pertains to larger companies, and been working with them since.
Fantastic. Thank you. Alkin, if you would.
Alkin Gorgun, I'm the CISO at MIS3. I've been in the industry for over 20 years now. I joined MIS3 a few years back. We're really focusing around this gap between business and security and IT, right? MIS3 operates with infrastructure, operations, and security. So in this new environment where the business is continually demanding us to be providing services faster and our applications are living in hybrid multi-cloud environments, how do we provide visibility and governance around it is really our main focus there. And along with that, I maintain an internal workforce that's 100% in the cloud, all remote. So lots of fun there.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you. Nick, if you would.
Yes, good morning. Nick Khoubbieh here with IBM Security Services. I've been with IBM for 2 years now. I've been in the cybersecurity business for about 20 years. My focus is on cloud security, infrastructure, and endpoint security. And I've helped customers across market verticals, government, commercial, as well as international. Glad to be here and looking forward to this session.
Fantastic. Thank you. And as I mentioned, my name is Bil Harmer. I've also been in the industry for 30 years, actually 32 now. So that, if I did my math correctly, gives us 102 years of experience sitting on this panel. And I have been through startups. I have been through financial institutions, large, small, and international as well. So with that, let me set the stage. And I'm going to start with a quote from Stephen King because I'm a super geek, as people can tell by the stuff that's around me. In The Gunslinger, the phrase was, the world has moved on, we say. We've always said, but it's moving on faster now. Something has happened to time. When you think about it, many companies were moving to a work from anywhere type infrastructure. Between 2015 and 2020, I personally saw a massive rise in the acceptance and adoption of new security models that shed sort of the old castle and moat in exchange for one that allowed companies to apply their security policies and procedures consistently, regardless of where the users were located. And it was sort of based on that premise of everything's great when I'm in the office because I have a great stack, but when I pop out to Starbucks for lunch and take my laptop with me, I'm down to antivirus and maybe a VPN or a local firewall, and that was about it. And to me, and guys disagree if you wish, and as we go along, consistency and security is paramount. We can have a great set of policies at the office, but if that's 9 to 5, 5 days a week, and people are still working and touching data and using assets and executing outside of those hours and outside of that infrastructure, those are holes. It's like golf. You can have a slice and you can make adjustments and play through a slice as long as you're consistent in your adjustments. So it's those things that we all have to adjust for, right? Whether it's a CEO with a particular need, want, demand, a department that has something that they have to do, or a pandemic that dramatically changes how we do things. And I think, to me, Corona truly affected time because companies had these roadmaps that were there, some established, some sketched, some back of the napkin, but Corona accelerated time. This was like being pushed off a base jump. We had rapid acceleration. We had time for maybe one quick trick, and then everybody hit the ripcord, right? And tried to figure out what was going to happen before we hit the ground really hard. So now we're 8 months into this. Now we're standing on the ground, looking back up at the cliff that we were just shoved off of. And we have to figure out what to do, right? Do we start climbing back up? Do we accept this as a new normal? Where is it? So with that in mind, if you take that sort of context, let's get into it. How have you, and I'll ask, we'll go through each of you, how have you changed your user access to enterprise applications? Was it a smooth shift to a new normal? And what communications did you use? Michael, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So man, I love your analogies. It's so
I love webinars. I can drink coffee while we do it.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to say there is no going back. Once businesses have realized the ability of their users to actually function, and that we can trust that they're working outside of the retail space that we've paid for, these buildings are now an asset we can get rid of. So that's the reality of it. I will say one of the biggest challenges we had was we had set up VPN for specific core individuals in the company, knowing that they're going to be roaming about, knowing that part of their job is to be out of the office. Everybody else, we kind of kept the reins on, and it was so hundreds of employees or thousands of employees were thought to be only working inside the office. And when the pandemic hit and we had to open up VPN, that was what we did. We opened it up as opposed to structuring it to the groups that that
was the ripcord that was pulled.
That was the ripcord, absolutely. And then so once we did that, we realized a second mistake is we had not set up all of these corporately owned devices to call back to the office once they're on VPN. And our users didn't need VPN for most of their functionality. They were using Office 365, they were using email, Salesforce, Concur, Workday, and they just did not need to dial back in. So now all of a sudden we're not monitoring systems. We don't know what patches are on there. We're not pushing patches. We're not updating their antivirus. Panic set in. So we literally had to do a mail out to ask them, please, please, please connect to VPN so we can touch you and gain access again.
Got it. Yeah, that's perfect. That's classic example of how do you react? That's a reactionary. We had a reaction, and how do you start doing this? Now you're standing on the ground going, okay, we got to start adjusting procedures. Excellent. Alkin, yourself, how about things at MIS3? And maybe as a consultant, one of your customers that you saw some dramatic change in.
Absolutely. I mean, from our perspective, we had the luxury that we're born in the cloud primarily. So we never had the traditional on-prem, off-prem environment, right? But I completely agree with Michael. As you look at the way business is shifting now, with applications being at the core of everything, right? Users need access to data and applications, and these applications no longer have to to reside in an on-premise environment. They can reside closer to the users with less latency, better productivity gains by going directly to the cloud services. But then how do you begin to enforce policies and govern that behavior of people going directly to the cloud? So some of the legacy technologies, unfortunately, don't allow us that flexibility, where we focus around new and emerging technologies. And being born in the cloud, those were some of the challenges around how do you gain that visibility on BYOD devices with contractors and partners, right? And getting the buy-in from them to jump into these managed device services where we can enforce policies. And so there's been some adjustment from that perspective, although largely our team was already in the cloud. With our customers too, we're seeing, as you mentioned, Bill, the shift from VPN, right? Backhauling all of that traffic through the data center. Now, a lot of VPN concentrators were blowing up initially with this shift. And so our conversations are focused around how do we make sure you can go directly to where you need to go for the services, and how do we do that more effectively in the cloud?
Excellent. And that's a subject after we hear from Nick, I'd like to come back to and maybe chat a little bit about, and it's a concept of VPN and split tunneling. Nick, yourself, what did you see at IBM?
A lot of what we've been doing over the past 12 months is working with client on shifting attention to the edge and securing the edge from that perspective. You talked about consistency of controls. And if you think about the pandemic and how it impacted how people are accessing the data from anywhere, basically home, Starbucks or what have you, tremendous interest from clients on focusing on identity and access management, and then from that perspective, network segmentations. And having that consistency of controls, regardless of where the edge is connecting from, and then connecting to, that is on-premise, hybrid, or the cloud. And I think this new normal is here to stay, as you said. I think there is a tremendous interest in using that new paradigm, if you will, and that focus on zero trust and segmentation and access management to help move at the speed of business, if that makes any sense, and then give that flexibility and that ability to scale the business and adjust and adapt as an enterprise management see fit.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, moving at the speed of business is critical, because we have historically been the brakes, right?
Yes.
We've always been either the department of no, where we just said, nope, you're not doing it. And then we became the brakes in the race car, because brakes make you go faster. All the analogies are out there, but the truth is we do need to move at the speed of business. I think it requires us as security professionals, and anybody out there who wants to be in the security world, wants to move up into the CISO role, learn how the business works first and foremost, right? Michael, you probably remember this back in the days of Manulife, and Nick, I'm sure you see this at IBM. They used to do hypos, where high performers, where they would move somebody around the organization to learn marketing, to learn accounting, to learn different divisions, and they did that because that was the future leader of the company. CISOs need to do that as well. They need to understand why they build a table the way they build the table, because they're a table maker. Why they source in the supply chain certain aspects, and what the risks are with those supply chain sources. Because, if I want to go after a table maker, I don't have to wipe out the whole company. I just have to blow away the company that makes the legs for them, or sends the material for the legs, because after that, you just got a bunch of platters. You don't have tables. And understanding what you can survive. So yeah, being able to move at the speed of business. But let's jump back into that question, or that statement about the VPNs, because I heard VPN in there a lot. And I personally think split tunneling was the most functional disaster ever to happen to security, because it was done to satisfy usability, right? People were screaming that the backhaul was horrific, that it was so slow, and typically it was a CEO going, "I want to watch NFL Sunday game in my hotel room while I'm working," right? And so we did split tunnels to allow critical stuff to come to the location, non-critical stuff to go straight to the internet. And all we did was create backdoors in, right? Because WannaCry ripped through VPNs. So in light of that, and because the reaction had to be, how do we handle that? Have you guys thought about any direction you're going to take your VPNs as you go forward with the new normal? Alkin, start with you if I could.
Yeah, we don't use any VPNs internally. There's certainly, for organizations that are using VPNs, ways that you can build security controls around it. It comes back to this concept of identity, and how do we define identity? How do we monitor user behavior once that identity is in? It's got to be contextual. It's got to be dynamic around, say somebody's authenticating through AD. What is the instance they're logging in from? Where are they going? And then giving them access only on a need per basis. So you can wrap that around traditional VPN solutions.
Yep.
The other way to do it is, of course, switching to this new reality of bringing access to the edge. So around CASB and secure web gateways, right? With allowing users to go directly through a different type of traffic steering rather than to the head office, but directly to the cloud through another gateway. and being able to enforce policy at that point.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I 100% agree with everything you said about identity. It's why I switched over to an identity company at the beginning of this year, because to me, the future of all of this is identity. Defining the identity, dynamic authorization is critical in that. Michael, how about yourself on the VPN side? What did you see?
So I was just chuckling to myself seeing you move from a CASB to an identity company.
Actually, the guys at Zscaler would be real upset if they heard that you called them just a CASB, but yes.
Well, and so I did a lot of research in the CASB space, and they were trying to sell themselves into that,
Yep.
once upon a time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yep.
Inline and, the platform concept.
Yeah, but as Alkin said, to me, it's not just identity; it's the context around that. So who are you? Do I trust who you are? What device are you coming in on? Do I know the network? Do I know the geographical region? And do I know your timestamp? And having all these things together and trusting each one of them, and building a context around it to allow you specific access.
Absolutely. The concept of behavioral analysis around a person, around these things, right?
Yep.
The telemetry that you can pull from one of those, I think is amazing. I did not know this last year, but you can actually learn whether that phone is in a purse or in a pocket, whether it's in the front pocket or the back pocket of somebody, based on the accelerometers and the tilt meters and all the different pieces. And you can establish behavior on somebody that maybe does something consistently, right? They always put it in a back pocket and walk, and starting to learn. And I think you'll start to see more and more of that around that identity, because people have been pushed so far out. We can't put eyes on them anymore, right?
Sure.
That's the tough one. Nick, how about yourself? Did you see a big swing in the VPN side of things over at IBM or with your customers?
I think I want to just echo what Michael and Alkin talked about. So there's definitely an interest in secure VPN and using secure gateways or brokers, whatever you want to call them, to control traffic and secure it. But fundamentally, I think what we've been working with clients on is broadening the understanding of their user community, and who needs to have access to what. And then from that perspective, going back to having the right policies and the right rules, if you will, when it comes to accessing the data, manipulating the data, and then location from where content is being consumed. So at the end of the day, technology is there to enable the business. But I think fundamentally what we've been talking to clients about and helping clients with is focus on better understanding the user community, the data, and then from that perspective, establishing the right policies and rules for who has access to what and when.
That's an excellent segue into sort of the next question I had then. So what challenges, and Nick, let's stay with you for this. What challenges are you seeing that you or your customers are having in isolating the core network or the core assets of an organization from public internet? Because the public internet is now our new corporate network. I think we can all agree on that. We're all sitting at home from the looks of it, doing our jobs. So what challenges are you seeing about finding a way to give the right person the right access at the right time? Is there something that's predominant that you see across different areas?
Yeah, I think part of the pattern, if you will, that we've seen is that clients are very comfortable and have a good understanding of their on-premise environments. They have a trusting in the cloud infrastructure, which is sometimes not always right. At the end of the day, that consistency between what you have on premise and how you have a tight control over the access and the identity of people doesn't necessarily translate well to the cloud. And then the other point that we see a lot of is data is everywhere, right? The days where you can assume that the data is centralized in one place. I mean, there are data replicated and data lakes across the environments. But the real challenge is sort of going back to basic and extending that, understanding sort of the assets and where the data reside, and then extending that knowledge of identity and access to all these environments in a consistent manner.
No, absolutely. The concept of data lakes, I think, is great. In truth, I think we have like data ponds and tons of data ponds everywhere. You know, if you pull back far enough, it kind of looks like a lake, but when you zoom in, there's little bits of land isolating all of those.
Not data swamps.
There's a few data swamps out there as well. I'm pretty sure of that. Michael, so your thoughts on sort of that data aspect?
Yeah, and we're moving more and more of our clients and such to cloud services. There's very little, even before this, there's very little internal data anymore. But there's this concept that the cloud is, you know, all secure, that my cloud provider is going to secure it for me. And so we'll take them through something as simple as a Office 365 health check. Okay. Yep. So you know, right from the beginning, you set up your corporation, you got your emails, Office 365, you go into their own health check, and out of the box, you get like a 2 out of 10.
Yep.
You know, and it's like, well, why is this? They're securing it for me. No, they're making it easy for you.
Yes.
You know, it's your job to secure it. They've given you the tools.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think AWS is a fantastic platform for building, right?
Sure.
Brilliant. And you know, they've got their security tools that you can implement. And components
that you can implement.
Yes. And components of each of those can be very secure. And then people forget that when you connect components together, the pathway through is may not be secure in the future. And that's the one that always frightens me, is when you put them all together, right? When you create DevOps and they get this, they all have their own agenda. And this is, I think, some of the training and some of the communications we have to do to help our employees, our departments understand what we're trying to achieve as a company, not what we're trying to achieve in security. And by the way, full disclosure, I think the security department should disappear and the CISO role should go away, because we should be at a point where this is all part of our business, right? Mm-hmm. It's an ideological thing that I'm trying to work myself out of a job, I think. But we should get to that point where they understand why they do this, why we're doing it. Just like, you know, on a Saturday night in a sketchy part of town, you look down an alley, you don't walk down there. It's natural. It's the radar goes off and you go, not a good idea. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to head somewhere where it's brighter or safer. Mm-hmm. That's what we have to develop, I think, on the internet, in the world of digital, how people stop believing certain things and move on. So Alkin, yourself, how are you dealing with that sort of that core and the data that's residing in there?
You're sparking so many thoughts here, actually. Data is everywhere, right? And part of the challenge has been around visibility, especially as you move into these cloud services and where's my data, who's touching it. The traditional on-prem tools don't help you there, right?
Yep.
So you do need visibility across everywhere on your structured data, unstructured data, semi-structured, and then to create risk profiles around, you know, what is the sensitivity, who's accessing it, and if the risk profile itself needs to be dynamic depending on the action and the user, right? This is where data governance becomes very critical, mapping that out and identifying what's happening where, and then being able to contextually make those risk decisions, right, around data governance.
Absolutely, absolutely. So can I assume all of you agree that security is a tool and risk is the objective, that we're trying to reduce risk using security as a tool, versus, because I struggle when I have, you know, boards or CEOs say, am I secure? Like it's a finish line.
And Bill,
I don't know.
Adding on to that thought, Bill, is you know, you need to start incorporating more and more of the business, right? It's a shared responsibility model within security and the rest of the business to identify what's sensitive to who, when, and giving that onus back to the business owners around. It's not just security here to protect you, but it's we do this together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we like to say that the users are some people say the weakest link. I say the easiest target, but we always say it's their job to be secure. Absolutely. It's our job to run the business as well, to understand the business. And I think that's where we've a lot of us, Michael and I both came up on the technical side of the world, right? And I couldn't have read a balance sheet to save my life 10 years ago. I have dramatically learned the other side of all of it. I learned how sales work. I learn and understand what's important to a sales rep, because their livelihood depends on them going from lead to conversion to closed sale. So they will find the easiest and simplest path through to that, because that's important to them. Yes, they want to keep their job, they want the company to do well, but they need to put food on the table as well. And we have to understand those driving factors, especially around end of quarter or end of year, when different things will happen and different behaviors will start to come through. So based on that then, so we're seeing massive shift. Michael, you touched on corporate real estate. I mean, if I know anything about businesses, it's how do I cut costs? If a stock trading company can get rid of prime real estate in downtown New York in exchange for a bunch of T1s or gig speed lines that go into people's houses so they can do their trading from there, and add on some security and governance tools to those machines, they will do it. I know for a fact that SecureAuth, we have offices in Argentina and offices in Irvine, California. They're shrinking. We've just made them smaller because nobody's in them. And then when we do get to go back to the office, how will we do it? Because as you said, a lot of people didn't believe they could do their job from home or from somewhere else. And now, well, lo and behold, they could. There was an emotional comfort factor, I think, from a lot of managers and organizations that said, I need to put eyes on people to know they're doing their job. And the truth, I think, came out that as long as the objectives and the KPIs that you laid out for your organization are met, jobs are getting done. And I'll make broad statements, but I know there's I can't build a car remotely yet. But a 9 to 5 job doesn't necessarily have to be done between 9 and 5, right? If somebody likes to get up at 4 a.m, you're an Elon Musk and sleep 3 hours at a time, or I don't know, maybe he's a vampire and doesn't sleep. But you can do your work from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. and then take your kids to school, or maybe your kids aren't in school yet, so you spend the day, share shifts with your significant other at home. Those types of things are starting to come out. We're seeing those things happening. So with all of that in mind, massive restructuring of the entire population of the world and how we work. How often are you looking at sort of that re-examining of access and protocols? And I'm thinking more, let's focus on the control protocols, the methodologies that people are using to access. Is this becoming more accelerated? And then access to, or do you feel a need to increase in that area? Nick, let's actually, Michael, let's start with you.
Okay, so, and I'm going to, full disclosure, I look after a bunch of small companies, so they're all a little bit different, and they're all in a different spot in their maturity. But the one thing that we do see is they're all taking a look at how they're connecting and what does that mean to the services that they've invested heavily in inside of their office infrastructure right now. So they've got this balancing act of, for the last 20 years, we've invested highly in all these licenses and all these systems. Are we going to gain benefit by walking away from that, or do we continue moving forward?
That's interesting. I had not thought, well, I have thought about it. I wasn't thinking about it in this context, but that legacy infrastructure, so not just on-prem, people probably invested in choices that were designed to work with their roadmap, and that roadmap just went. So how do they compress that timeline? Do they walk around? And I think walking away from some assets or some investments is necessary. Making hard, fast choices early would be, I think, beneficial. Even if that hard, fast choice is, I'm going to stay with this particular one, but I'm going to have to change something over there.
Some things you just can't lift and shift either, right? So if you've got a significant SAP or Oracle infrastructure in your data center, it's not a very, very quick lift and shift to get that into the cloud.
Absolutely. Though SAP is trying to do that for you from what I understand. But mainframes. There are mainframes still out there doing their jobs really well.
Yep.
I think IBM still says JCL was the biggest disaster that they ever created 48 years ago or whatever, because I used to write it, and I was a disaster at it. But yeah, like, I mean, when you've got a machine that does massive I/O fast, why would you rip it out? So how do you incorporate that into the new paradigm of nobody sitting at a dumb terminal or nobody sitting on a local network that has access? And how do we do MFA on a mainframe, right? Those types of questions are now starting to pop up. Nick, how about yourself? So seeing as I just threw IBM half under a bus, no offense, sorry. Everybody hates JCL, I think.
And we still have a lot of clients with mainframe, believe it or not. And I think just from a process perspective or from an approach perspective, the idea is that clients have invested a lot of money in security and controls, if you will. And the only way to maximize on what they have is to focus on the security architecture, if you will, and get a better understanding of the protective and detective controls in place, right? Often we find that they have enough controls that, there are some low-hanging fruit, if you will, that can get them by to start with. And a lot of what they may be wrestling with is a lack of, or a good configuration, or lack of understanding of what are the requirements for what needs to be configured. So that's step one. I think, from a repeatable process perspective, the idea of defense in depth and building layers of controls around your data, starting with data security, moving to identity access management, cloud infrastructure security, and so on and so forth, getting into the security operations and what have you is key in how you harden that security architecture and look at the existing assets that a client has and start guiding them through that journey of moving at the speed of the business. And then from that perspective, looking at cybersecurity really as a business enabler, not as a cost center, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And that pain that comes with those dramatic changes, I think Corona gave us a bit of a blank check on inflicting pain on the organization because there was no other choice. And I think those that were conscious or had a good roadmap in place and knew where the pain points were and saw what was happening somewhere, I would say probably around that May, June timeframe, where we went, okay, this is not a couple of months. This is not basic. We are not, up curving or changing. This is going to be a bit of a long haul. I think some Band-Aids hopefully got ripped off real quick around that June timeframe, where you could then say, all right, look, this is going to hurt no matter what. We either hurt later, we hurt now. Let's do it now and push through. I think others went, I can't risk anything because there's nobody around. I have got no IT support for it, right? That was a big one that I kept hearing was, I don't have the IT hands-on desktop support for a complete remote workforce of 30,000 people. So I can't make these changes. And they were looking at how do you augment that in order to then start pushing these changes through, because they knew they were going to hurt, but it was going to require a lot of hand holding and remote desktop. And it was easier just to walk over to a person's desk bring them into the office. Remember the days, Michael, when we used to do that, you had to wander downstairs with your laptop and IT would do something to it and hand it back to you and off you go. So that's an interesting one. Alkin, yourself, how are you seeing on that review of the protocols and the increase or decrease?
Yeah, I think we touched on legacy. There's certainly a lot of legacy out there, but I think the shift around what's happening right now, it's interesting, right? Because we have literally jumped an economic era to the digital, and so this shift has been coming, and it has had to come for a long time. I think Corona just sort of accelerated what was already happening. And with regards to IT roadmaps and legacy infrastructure, absolutely, there's certainly a lot of that. However, the new way of doing things in the cloud has to shift. It has to be a different roadmap, and we do have to re-architect in some ways. So I think it comes back to just gaining more visibility visibility around the applications. The term identity itself is not just users anymore, it's devices, it's third parties, right?
Right.
And you can't do it without full visibility around who's accessing what. That's where you start, right? And then we start to map out in a new way. And we look at what do we have legacy that we need to keep going with, and how do we introduce automation and orchestration within that? So doing firewall rules automatically, for example, and whatnot. But then when we move into these new environments, how do we continue to do that through an automated context with machine learning, AI, right? To stay on top of that.
So that interesting then. So adapting monitoring and adapting reporting is going to be, I think all three of you are saying that it's going to be critical to how we go forward. So Alkin, let's sort of continue down that. What do you think? Make a prediction. What do you think is the way to do this? How do you increase that when you've got BYOD, you've got non-carbon life forms, right? You've got the IoTs, the machines. You've got, in my opinion, everybody that connects to the corporate network, say I'm doing my work, I am sitting in a hostile environment, right? My corporate world does not control this network. It's my personal one. So everybody's sort of connecting from what I would have to euphemistically call a hostile environment. How do you increase that or manage that monitoring, the reporting, the visibility? What do you think would be good way if you were to advise somebody?
Well, I would say, it's new tools. We need new tools. New tools bring on new capabilities. As I'm sure with SecureAuth, you have run into a lot of that, right? It's an better understanding of identities, better understanding of data. And we can now go from, traditionally we would segment networks. Everyone in this network is trusted and outside of it is not, whatnot. Now we're going into identity-based, right, security, and really getting microsegmentation down to a process level. What is the process or service that this user or identity is trying to access? And how do we prevent them from going anywhere else? And so this can only be done with new thinking, with new architecture, with new tools that are available.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I think, well, you guys are just making me feel so much better about, career choices and moving to identity. Because, same thing, as I saw 5 years of companies, in the early days, walking in and talking to Nick and saying, hey, Nick, I need you to take your firewalls out, those hardware devices that you've relied on for the last 20 years. Let's get rid of those and we're going to do everything in the cloud. And it was a tough sell, right? It was a hard conversation, but when you framed it correctly about the move to work from anywhere, the decreasing office, it started to become, and as we saw over 5 years, it became more normal. The Palo Altos, the Zscalers, the Cisco umbrellas, that functional security stack that followed you anywhere made sense, made people more productive, gave a higher level of visibility, et cetera, et cetera. But the one thing I always saw missing was the identity, right? Every one of those companies, Zscalers, Palo, Cisco, Cisco kind of looked at it when they bought Duo, but they all said, authenticate your users, hand me a SAML token and I will, and then apply whatever magic formula came after that, right? And it was all based on the SAML token that came over. Well, who keyed the password was my question. How do we know? And more to Alkin's point, around that microsegmentation and coming down to the process level. If I've done my MFA, and I've done my MFA because I'm me and I have to do whatever I have to do for my job. If somewhere during my session, I do something different, right? It can't be one and done. Can't be, I'm going to MFA Bill to death at the beginning. He's going to get 7 different things. We're going to have some facial recognition, a thumbprint, YubiKey, and a CAC card, and they're all going to be done. And then I'm going to let him do whatever he wants for the rest of his life, as long as that session's alive. We can't be doing that. We have to get to the point of it needs to be constant, right? We need to have constant authentication, dynamic authorization, so that, well, these things have happened, so Bill should be allowed to do this. But if those things haven't happened, then Bill can't do that, right? Those kinds of provisioning need to start developing. And as Alkin said, new tools breed new processes. Nick, what do you think?
In addition to everything Alkin said, which I agree with, I think there is an element of artificial intelligence that's going to play a tremendous role in terms of identity and user behavior, if you will, because we can configure, the controls. We can define the policies and the rules and what have you. We need that extra level of correlation and checking, if you will, that AI will play a major role in sort of detecting anomalies, if you will, and or giving us the ability to check for things that are abnormal. And I think as AI becomes more, part of the cybersecurity fabric, there's going to be a tremendous reliance on artificial intelligence to help with that scalability and consistency, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our world in the early days, and I'm sure you all remember when they had dynamic rules, this happened, we can change the rule, and everybody went, no, because that just was a disaster waiting to happen. I think nowadays people are a little bit more accepting of false positives. So if something gets blocked, they're like, okay, we blocked it because of a security potential issue. Let's work on that and figure it out. But you're absolutely right. It also can't be broad brushstrokes either. It can't be Bill did something a little odd, kill access. It has to be something, I think, to the effect of something happened, something's a little different, an anomaly has been detected. Let's do another check. Is the phone still patched? Has a vulnerability come out that matches the access device? Maybe we just pop an MFA, right? At that point, we say, okay, Bill, give me your YubiKey, just because things are a little sketchy, right? And being able to have that, because usability, it keeps it usable, right? I don't know how many people get frustrated like I do, but to me, when a UX isn't designed correctly and the usability isn't there, like just simple things. I use a password manager, and for a while after they did one of their updates, when it asked for your MFA, it did not put focus into the box where you were supposed to key it. That makes me mental, just crazy, because you have just asked me to punch in a 6-digit number. I have grabbed my phone, I have opened it, I've done my facial recognition, my fingerprint, whatever. I brought it up, I found the one. I'm looking at it, my hand goes to that number pad because I'm old school. I still got a number pad on my keyboard, and I rap out 6 numbers, and they're nowhere to be found because you did not bring focus to that box. Like, I mean, just little things like that can make you crazy. It would actually make me almost want to change provider on that one. Thankfully, they listened to my whining and complaining and they fixed it. But that's usability, right? Simple usability, because I think we did some studies to find out, but the average user wastes somewhere in the order of 12 and a half minutes a week just keying or rekeying a password. Now, if you have a 15,000 user organization, that is about $5 million in lost productivity from people typing crap in over and over again. That's massive. And that's where we as security professionals need to understand business, need to understand how we can affect top and bottom line, and how we can bring solutions in that make their lives easier and simpler. Michael, yourself, what do you see on that side?
So one of the things, we talk about genies out of the bottle, right? So with BYOD, we accepted this a long time ago, that this is a strategy inside of our corporations, and we thought that was bad then. But at least then we had control and visibility into what these devices that we've now given access to. Without identity, that BYOD device that you've given corporate access to now at somebody's home is just scary.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because, as you said, we had a modicum of control over BYOD, right?
And we were scared of it then.
We were terrified of it then because we had no idea what they were doing with it. And who here remembers the days of carrying 2 phones, corporate and not, right?
Yep.
The only guys I see doing that nowadays are the government people, because literally most governments have some process that says, I get to walk in and take it, right? There's no asking, there's no question. You don't get to delete the text message or the pictures or copy anything. I simply get to walk in, take your device. So those guys tend to carry 2. But beyond that, we all carry 1 now, right? It's just simpler. And I think that's driven home the BYOD concept, right? But yeah, when we looked at Corona and went, how many laptops do we have in storage? And IT said, 10, and you needed 600 people went, okay, let's roll back some policies on using, and how do we then secure, right? And we started, adjusting VPNs. And I love that story. I don't know if you guys heard that Cisco, when this all happened, they just did, it's not that they didn't have the license, they own the license. They just didn't physically have the infrastructure up and ready for whatever 30,000 employees that they have globally, or 300,000 employees they have globally. Anybody that does pandemic planning plans for the improbable. This was the impossible. Like this was not thought of. And Michael, let's go down memory lane there a little bit. Were you on the pandemic planning at Manulife when I was on it?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
so you remember those days. Friday mornings, they would have it, and I always wondered why they had it on Friday, and then I learned why. You'd have it Friday morning, you'd have a 4-hour planning session on literally horrible things like 40% of the population's dead. Another 55% or 40% are incapacitated, and you've got maybe 10 or 15% that can still function, but they're going to do it from a sealed house where they've nailed their door shut. And these were terms that were used, and we're going, never going to happen. But after 4 hours of that, you also sort of went home. They always gave you the afternoon off, because after 4 hours of that, you were just depressed. Like it was just, but that was big, large financial institutions. Small companies, DR was, did I lose a server? Did maybe one of my offices go down because of power or a hurricane or something? We did reasonable disaster recovery and business continuity. Nobody really thought that this would happen where everybody would go home and offices would be empty. So it became an interesting exercise in, all right, we don't have hardware for it. We're going to allow it. We're going to open up the VPNs. We're going to change the policies. I know holes were punched in everybody's environments to make things work. So how are you now looking at auditing, assessing, or going back and adjusting? Because we punched a big hole here for most protocols to this particular server or from that particular house. How are you going to, or how do you think users should prioritize that audit reassessment of those things? Michael, I'll start with you on that one.
I don't know if I'm the right one to even. I don't have an answer for you that, because we're still working through those questions.
Okay, excellent. All right, and self-awareness is great, because it's better that you say I don't know than try to make something up. And that I think that's been a historical problem. We've had a lot of people that just say stuff and don't have the self-awareness. Say no, don't know just yet. Not ready for that one. Fair enough. Alkin, how about yourself? Ready? Not ready?
Well, it's certainly tough, right, when you have so many holes to fill and whatnot. But on the concept of risk, we've been talking about identity and understanding what users are doing. I think the other aspect of this is the threats. So we're getting better at understanding the threat landscape and getting better at prioritizing sort of what's real. Going back to the improbable, right? COVID was certainly very improbable and caught us off guard in a lot of ways. But now we can go back to kind of looking at what's the probable and likelihood of a breach here and there and against certain areas, and really need to start focusing our audit and around those areas primarily. You can't do 1,000 things. You can do these 300 things first, and that's the most likelihood, and you reduce your risk as much as you can, and then you move on to the others kind of approach. So I suggest taking it beyond just looking at the users, but also looking at the threat to really understand the risk and prioritizing that way.
Do you think in that way that there'll be a knee-jerk reaction to the improbable in everything? And this worries me as well, because we didn't typically address improbable, and now we can. Pendulums like to swing, and they like to swing hard. So we're going to be way over here going, all right, improbable in A, B, C. We're going to always be improbable for a while. I think at least security people can use that to maybe, again, hit budgets a little bit better, or adjust some things, get some things that they couldn't do. But what do you think?
You're asking some tough questions, Bill. And it comes back to business alignment, right? Just again, talking to the business stakeholders and owners and data owners and custodians around what does the improbable look like? And again, what is the most sensitive? Because you can't do everything under the sun. So how do we use limited resources to focus?
So I think that's that consistency there. What's important to the business, right? Where do we want to invest? Why would we do that? And then building out from that against the questions that are asked, the improbable. Nick, how about over at IBM? Big company, lots of customers too.
So we've been focusing lately on, or we've adopted the MITRE ATT&CK framework, if you will, and we've adapted that to help clients get a better understanding of the risk and risk posture, specifically around tactics and techniques and threat vectors, if you will. It's very tactical in nature. We can sort of pinpoint a specific technique or a bunch of tactics and go test the controls, if you will, and come back and give them or provide a better understanding of what needs to be hardened, where the gaps are, and then from that perspective, what measures or what steps need to be taken to remediate those gaps. I think the traditional sort of maturity NIST cybersecurity framework is still a good foundation, if you will, to sort of put that roadmap and figure out how you're going to sort of evolve all aspects of or all the pillars of your cybersecurity. But I believe that the MITRE ATT&CK framework is very tactical in nature and can help a CISO answer that question that a board of director may be asking about, hey, our competition got hit by this particular ransomware. Are we immune from it? Or, what do we need to do that? If you employ the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you can get closer to an answer for what deficiencies and gaps you may have or controls may have, and then how to harden those.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael?
Yeah, so went through this audit recently where we've now pushed all of these security controls from our internet-facing firewall out to all of the endpoints and their firewalls. It's still Palo Alto, but now we've moved it from being something on the edge of our corporate business to being on the endpoint. Now, how do we assess those controls against the NIST?
Yep.
Do we know that they're all functional, that they're all, whereas it used to be a pair of devices?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think using a framework is a great way to start. It gives you a base to work off of, and adjusting your framework. That'll be difficult for the ones that need to be compliant with NIST or need to be compliant with whatever PCI or whatever framework they're using. But consciously understanding what and making decisions around where to adjustments to happen. There was a woman, I've forgotten her name. She's doing some very incredible work in the field of identity, and has worked off a similar MITRE style framework for identity, which I think is fantastic, because we are at that tipping point where those of us, between us and our 102 years of computer experience, this doesn't seem odd to have digital identities, to pay attention to them, to manage them and watch for behavioral changes. I'm sure every one of our radar go up when our phone goes ping and an odd message comes through. We don't click away. But if you think about, when North America was settled and people were coming here, there was these pockets of towns and cities and settlements, and maybe there was some law, maybe there was some governance, or maybe there wasn't. And it was all around how fast the information moved between those pockets of civilization. And I think we're doing that on the digital side, right? We're seeing those different pieces. I can buy something in Germany, they put it in the mail, it shows up here. Geopolitical borders are getting very porous when it comes to digital and data, right? We all look at digital attacks from foreign states, the ability to set up machines in a non-extradition country and launch attacks that way. There's all these different things that are happening. And the citizens, or the netizens, as we called them back in the day. God, I'm dating myself. Netizens are very ignorant, and not in the bad sense of the word, but simply in the uneducated, don't understand what is happening to their digital identity out there, and being able to I think we're going to see semblance start to coalesce around that concept, because that attack framework is, I think, a fantastic way to deal with the attacks, right? Because it is tactical, because there is the concept of threat intel, services out there that help share information without sharing information, which has always been a tough sell in the threat intel business, because anybody who says, well, I'm going to give you threat intelligence, yeah, I'm going to do it after it's deprecated or redacted, and it's not going to really affect my business because corporate lawyers get all over it. And I understand that it's part of the business. When you find these global services that have tens of thousands of customers that can utilize that information and help you make decisions without having to reveal where it came from or who it was. We just know financial industry is being attacked in this manner. You're in the financial industry. Here's our recommended changes to help, right? That is what we have to look, I think, what we have to look for out there, especially around identity as well. Alkin, yourself, what are you seeing?
Yeah.
Big questions. I know. It's a bad habit. It's my slightly paranoid side also jumping in there.
There's user awareness and training is very important. It's very near and dear to me as well. I ran a business doing user awareness training. I do executive classes now, in a classroom, and executives are people with access to the information are definitely being targeted more and attacked in a very real way. So that's certainly one thing. I think at a very high level, technology is moving so fast, right? So I always come to this analogy where, in cars, when cars first came out, they didn't have seatbelts, and they didn't have seatbelts for like 20, 30 years, right? Which is shocking. Technology has made that 20, 30-year move in just a matter of 5, 10 years. And so we as people haven't adjusted. We just haven't gotten used to building the habits of putting on that seatbelt, right? So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it, which I think I see optimistically as technology overcoming this challenge, is it's kind of scary too. And I'm sure it's Securath around the way people are touching the cell phone and how, holding it close to your ear versus moving it this way. And you usually push it with your left hand and your right thumb or whatever. So it's learning that and adjusting dynamically to how we use the technology that's going to improve authentication, authorization. Which is also very scary from a privacy perspective around, and safeguarding of that data. So it's, again, it's a big, broad question. I don't have all the answers. I don't think we do as a society around passwords and that, but we're getting better, I think.
I firmly agree. We are getting better. And I think, you're absolutely right. That the analogy of the seatbelt is fantastic, because on top of that, the car manufacturers put in airbags, which we don't control, right? They realize that we have to take some of these decisions away from people and help them on their behalf as well. And I think that's going to happen in the security world, where the fewer decisions somebody has to make, the less chance they have of making the wrong decision. And that's, what is it? The FBI is saying 90% of today's attacks are a phishing type attack where somebody makes a decision, right? So we need to find ways to handle that. We've got about 2 minutes left. So how about closing statement? If you've got a little bit of advice for the people out there listening, what would you like to leave them with? Nick, why don't we go with you first?
I think one of the fundamentals that we have to think about as security professional is get involved early on in the design process, and make sure that wherever you're building, wherever you're trying to deploy, is secure by design. And don't get at the tail end of, oh gosh, I have to push this application out or enable this platform. Is it secure? And that's a cheaper way of doing things, if you ask me.
Yep, absolutely. You don't want to be at the tail end. You need this nowadays. This needs to be done by design. Yep. Michael.
Yeah, just so with my thing, everything moving to the cloud, all of our current cloud providers have security options built in and health checks, and all the tooling is there. Use it. Integrate if you've got a hybrid Azure, AWS, Google, integrate them so that as a recipient of that information, you get as much together as you can, and use the tools that are there and available and free.
Absolutely. Good advice. Alkin?
I think, as we say at MIS3, you have to start reimagining your business in the new digital era, right? So how do we use digital to better empower our customers, our employees, our internal operations? How do we improve all of this? And so it is a reimagining of the entire spectrum. And you need to do it with security in mind, because governance is the biggest challenge.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. With that, gentlemen, I will like to say thank you. I will go back and again quote Stephen King: "The world has moved on. It is moving faster now, and something's happened to time, and it's not going to change." That little bit is my addition to the end. We do have to start looking at how we do things. We have to reimagine our business. We have to rely on our vendors more. Most things nowadays are as a service. We call it cloud. We call it, all these different names, but it's as a service. So push for that service and spend your money where you get good service. That's the true testament of how we do this. We are at a minute over, so I will say thank you all. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you people at CyberX for putting this on and giving us the opportunity to have a conversation. Gentlemen, it's been fantastic. And I wish you all the best in your endeavors as you go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.